Hi, Priyanka.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. It's just been a very long, hectic week in Delhi, and yeah, I've been busy, but I'm good. I'm good. How are you? How are you? And I caught the last 5 minutes of probably the last session. Seemed to be a good, fun session. So
It was
lots of
indeed.
questions. Yeah, lots of questions. I
Yeah,
always like sessions where there are lots of questions because it
yeah,
means the audience is engaged. So that's good. So
it's true.
congrats. Good. So yeah, once again, I mean, yeah, thanks for having me over and season for Adventures of Literati. So
Yeah.
yeah, good going.
And thanks, Shatrujeet, for coming, for being there with us even for season two. I hope this session is going to be equally interesting and enriching like the last one. So, hello, everyone. Dear audience, I would like to give you a brief about the speaker today. I'm sure you all know Shatrujeet, but to give a glimpse of his work, he's been the creator of the runaway national bestseller series Vikramaditya Veer Gatha, which was a four-book mytho fantasy arc that comprised of The Guardians of Halahal, The Conspiracy at Meru, The Vengeance of Indra, and The Wrath of Hellfires. He's described as a new face to Indian mythology by DNA. Shatrujeet writes for movies and web shows as well. He is also the author of The Karachi Deception, which was an Indo-Pak spy thriller, his first book. Very soon, Shatrujeet will also be launching his new series that he's already disclosed on all his social media handles, and we are really awaiting to know more details. And I hope I can get some hints out in this session. So, Shatrujeet, let's start with the
Yeah,
first
thanks a
question.
lot. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, having written a very successful arc on mytho fantasy, on mytho fiction, what is this concept of alternative mythology, and why does this idea of alternative mythologies appeal you so much?
Okay, it's actually like this. You know, the reason why I talk about alternative mythology as opposed to normal mythology is because you know, I tend to write what I define as alternative mythology or alternate mythology. And I think the only reason I say that is because, you know, I am usually invited to literary panels, and they ask me whether I write about mythology, and actually I don't, because I don't really write mythology. I write what I call alternative. Sorry, excuse me. What I call alternative mythology. So just to give you an idea as to what alternative mythology really is, so let's take another similar speculative fiction genre called alternative history or alternate history. Now, what happens in alternate history is that it takes any known aspect of history and kind of gives you an alternate take on that history. So, for example, if one were to take Quentin Tarantino's Inglorious Bastards, so we all know how World War II ended, and you know how Hitler died, and all of that. But Inglorious Bastards looks at a completely different way of how World War II ended. It's about a bunch of American soldiers and Jewish resistance troops who basically go and assassinate Hitler. That's not really what happened, but the alternate history tells you that, you know, that's really what happened. So alternate histories actually looks at history from a different point of view, and starts from a point of saying, what if? What if things had not happened the way they had happened, and what if they had happened differently? So, for example, there's a show called Man in High Castle on Prime Video, which essentially looks at what if the World War II had been won by the Germans and by the Nazis and the Japanese, and what if they had occupied the United States of America? So that's an alternative history. It looks at how history would have changed from that point of view. So to take that same idea forward, what I do with my storytelling, and definitely very true with the Vikramaditya Veergatha series, is it takes a what if scenario. So what I did was I took a what if scenario. We all knew that during the Sagar Manthan, you had the poison that came out, and you know it was destroying the universe. And the Devas and the Asuras took it to Shiva, and he drank it, and he saved the universe. That's the mythology that we know. So my what if mythology was, what if all that halahal or that poison had not been destroyed? So it takes an alternative idea to a known mythology, known and established mythology, spins it in a different way. So that's really what alternative mythology is all about. I enjoy telling those kind of stories because yeah, they're fun. And even with the next series that I'm doing, it's not so much a what if, but it's a what how rather. So I will come to that in a little while. But that's the whole idea of alternative mythology. It doesn't retell a story. It doesn't. It's distinct from a retelling. It just takes an idea and runs with it in a different direction from known storytelling, known narratives. That's really what alternative mythology is. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
So why does it appeal you so much?
Oh, why does it appeal to me so much? Yeah, I think it's simply because it alternative mythology helps me explore new facets of known mythology, known legends, known stories. So I've grown up reading, watching, listening to mythological stories, and somewhere along the way, I've realized that there's very little new that I can I have to share with readers as a storyteller if I were to tell those same stories. So what I like to do is I like to take that a known story and give it a little bit of a spin, which allows me to tell the story in a whole new way. Take known elements and create a whole new story, which I think for readers is also exciting because it's. I definitely know for a fact that my readers love the fact that I take things that are familiar and make them unfamiliar and present them in new ways, new and surprising ways. So that's really what it is. So for example, what happened was that in alternative mythology helps me also relook at incidents and characters. So for example, now we look at let's take Vikramaditya Veergatha as an example. We all know our common idea of Indra as a character. We've grown up reading about Indra being a weakling. He's a little bit of a weak character. He's always his position is under threat. The asuras are constantly attacking Devaloka, and Indra is constantly running to either Shiva or Vishnu or Brahma for help. Now that's the character that we are familiar with. So what I did with Vikramaditya was I relooked at Indra completely and made him an extremely powerful, arrogant, a very powerful, strong character. And it was a character that, for a lot of readers who had grown up reading Indra as the weak, meek, submissive, almost, a little bit of a coward, that character suddenly becoming very domineering and daunting. I think that was nice. I almost present him almost like a bully in this series. So I think that's really what I love about it. I love doing those fill in the blanks. So, for example, the other thing I like doing is, again, if one were to take the Vikramaditya Veergatha series, in known mythology, there is the fact that you've got these Maruts. The Maruts are supposed to be Indra's kind of they're slaves. They're Indra's slaves, or they could or they basically work for Indra. But the interesting thing is that the Maruts are actually asuras by birth. So, but if you were to go back and look at, you really need to dig very deep to try and figure out how did the asuras become slaves and servants of Indra, or how did, for example, Indra's wife, she belongs, she has asura blood. So I think these are things that there are gaps in our mythology, and I think alternative mythology helps me bridge those gaps in fun ways, and that's really what I love doing. So yeah, that's why.
Yeah, that's. I think that that makes our idea clear about what alternative mythology is, and I think that's the crux of your writing. About even if we see at the Vikramaditya, because your plot says your plot takes a twist from the time that the halahal is handed over to a person, or rather, that's what if it was handed over to the person, and that's how the entire story spins. And so it's retelling what if, and I think a lot of mytho-fiction or mytho-fantasy is around this. What if this happened, and what if this did not happen the way it did? So
Correct,
interesting
correct.
to know. It's interesting to know. It's interesting to know your this kind of alternative mythology, and we will. I think we will dive deeper into what it is. So the next question goes. To understand this better, can you tell us how alternative mythology is different from retelling the existing mythology? If you could elaborate a little more.
Okay, yeah, I think that's interesting because so what happens is that A retelling can either be a straight retelling of a story, it's just
Perspective.
fleshed out better in terms of characters and drama and storytelling, or a retelling can be the story told from another character's perspective. So there are two
Yeah.
ways of doing it. Yeah. So one is I take the Ramayana, and what I do is I just say that, okay, I will retell the Ramayana, but I'll just make it more dramatic. I'll create the war scenes better. I'll add technology to it. I'll basically, so it's basically you're still telling the same story, but just telling it in a more contemporary, more dramatic fashion. So that's one kind of retelling. The other retelling is where you tell, it's essentially the same story, but just told from a different character's perspective. So for example, you could turn around and say, so you could turn around and look at and say that this story will be told from the perspective of, say, Dushasan, or this story will be told from the perspective of Shakuni. The story itself does not change. Probably the story remains the same. Unless it turns around. So, for example, an alternative mythology would be if I take the Mahabharata and I take Dushasan's character, and what happens is that the Kauravas actually win the war and the Pandavas are defeated. That is an alternative mythology because that's not the known mythology. So, but if I tell the story from Dushasan's point of view, and still Dushasan dies and the Kauravas lose, it's still only a retelling. Because all I've done is, okay, I might turn around and say, the story might say that Dushasan believed that the Kauravas were right and the Pandavas were wrong. That's okay. That's a perspective. That's a point of view. But the story does not change. The mythology does not change. Just the perspective changes. So in a retelling, what happens is it's essentially you're telling the same story either in a punched up, snazzier delivery mechanism, in a snazzier narrative mechanism, or you're telling it from a different character's point of view. Right. Alternative mythology changes the story. Right. So I think that's fundamentally the difference. Does your story change or does your story remain the same? If your story changes, or if your story is a completely new story which does not exist in mythology, that is alternative mythology. That's what it is. That's the difference.
Got it. But Shatrujeet, just an answering question, like you gave example of retelling a story from different perspective. Like since Ramayana and Mahabharata have been very dear to people who write in mythology, or even if it's mythology of even religious text. But when you say that it's because a lot of stories were retold from perspective of, say, Ravana or even Sita, I mean, Amish and even Kavita, for that matter, have done this work of, they have taken characters, and because we read stories, we've been reading about about Rama as a king, as a righteous king. But when we see it from different perspectives, our perspective changes. But of course, like you said, the story will not change. Ravana will be defeated at the end. Rama is going to win. But when you talk about alternative mythology, where you're actually thinking of changing the story, like Kauravas are winning. So this is just, what do you think? Can you do that? I mean, and what are the, how heavy, or what will be the consequences? Because people just know, is it really wise to do that for a myth writer?
I think it depends on
or the liberty. Can we have that liberty to do that?
I think it ultimately depends on the writer and the publisher. It depends on what they want to achieve by that storytelling. So I don't think there's anything right or wrong. Because again, as I said, you could tell the story of the Ramayana from Ravan's point of view and have Ravan lose, and still Ravan come across as a hero. So, so I don't think that there's anything fundamentally wrong in changing a story, as long as you know why you're doing it, and what is the objective that you're working towards. Is your objective to really present an alternate point of view? Is your objective to critique an existing text? Is your objective? So I think those are the how it's going to be accepted. See, you could turn around and say, how, let's take Anand Neelakantan's Asura. We all know that Asura is the story of Ravan. So you could turn around and say, I don't know how people are going to accept Ravan as a hero, but the book worked very, very well, and people admired. Okay, there have been critics of Anand's work, but I think by and large, everyone acknowledges that Anand produced a piece of work which gave us an alternative point of view on the Ramayana. It made us understand Ravan as a character. So I think that's really what it is. I think readers are mature enough. You will always have readers and viewers and listeners who would be unhappy. But I think, as I said, what is your idea? What is your objective? So you could always go back and and anything can be defended. So the Kauravas could be defended, Ravan could be defended. It's ultimately how you tell the story. So alternative mythology, again, if you were to see, that's again, like for example, we look at Inglorious Bastards. What happens is that Tarantino does, while he gives you an alternative history, he doesn't change the ending. The ending is that Hitler still dies, and the Nazis, the Nazi system fails, and the good guys still win. So I think that's really what it is. It's a tightrope. It's a tricky thing to do, because obviously, yes, you are going to step on toes. You are going to rub people the wrong way. But I think so. You must be very clear why you're doing it, and if you have a compelling reason to do it, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. I But of course, yeah, you must be aware that we live in an environment where it's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult to do these kind of things. So you must be clear why you're doing it.
I think it's a very challenging art to do so. And like you said, the objective has to be clear, and the acceptance would be a great factor in these kind of alternative mythologies.
Correct. Absolutely.
Something familiar and even give a different flavor to it. Even
correct.
Keeping the ending same, but a different perspective, like you have already illustrated with Asura. Okay,
correct.
So coming back to Vikramaditya series, which was a great example of using known mythology to tell an original story. How did you go about building this Vikramaditya Veergatha plot? And what did you have in the beginning, and how did the plot change and grow when you were actually
in terms of the structure?
Yes, in terms of structure, and how, like, we want to know, like, as you said, you took some parts from mythology, which is like the halahal, and then building up, saying, what if this happened? So how much did you have at the beginning, and how did it change and grow at your end?
Fair, I get that. So actually what happened was that, I think this is true of all storytelling. When you start, you've got some very basic ideas, and you've got some very basic thoughts, and then you gradually start plotting and making it stronger, and then you start writing it, and as you flesh it out, it just grows richer and bigger and better, hopefully. So with Vikramaditya, in the beginning, when I actually started writing it, all I actually had was the Halahala, I had Vikramaditya, and I had the 9 counselors. That's all, and Betal. I mean, I knew that this is what my story was going to be about. I also knew somewhere along the way that the moment the Devas and the Asuras came into the picture, I knew that there would be Indra and Hiranyakashipu, because Indra is the king of the Devas, and Hiranyakashipu is the king of the Asuras. But so I had my heroes and my villains. That's all I really had. But I'll get back to Indra and Hiranyakashipu in a little while. But then what happened was that obviously I started looking at my heroes, and I started looking at the dynamics between my heroes. So I think that's and part of what I'm going to share right now is essentially how stories grow in terms of their structure, in terms of their content, in terms of their ideas. So when I said that I would have Vikramaditya, I knew that I would always have Kalidasa, because Vikramaditya and Kalidasa are contemporaries, and we've known them to be together. So when I started exploring Kalidasa, I said that, okay, Vikramaditya and Kalidasa are going to be very good friends. And Kalidasa would probably be very loyal to Vikramaditya and all of that. So this was good. But after some time, what happened was that, so I said, okay, this is also a story about friendship. So which was good. But then as I kept working on the idea, and I realized that, the barbarian Hunas would be a part of this story, and I knew that the Hunas would be an integral part of the story. I started, so I had the Hunas, and I had Vikramaditya and Kalidasa as friends, and I suddenly thought, okay, what if I made Kalidasa an orphan? So you try to look at the the backstories of characters, and I was struggling with Kalidasa's backstory, so I didn't know what to do with his backstory. So I thought it would be nice if he was an orphan, and he really doesn't know who he is. And so maybe Vikramaditya kind of adopts him when he's young, and that's how they're friends and all of that. I said that's also nice, because it's a friendship between a king and an orphan. So I thought that was an even better way of showing a friendship. Rather than a friendship between equals, social equals, it's a friendship between two unequal people. And I thought that was a great dynamic. But then when the Hunas came into the picture, when the barbarian Hunas came into the picture, I thought, okay, what if I now added another layer to it? So what you're seeing is that I'm adding layers to that same idea of Vikramaditya and Kalidasa being friends. From friends to being friends where one adopts the other as an orphan. Now what I do is I add another layer to it, and I say that what if Kalidasa was actually originally a Huna, the Huna barbarians, and he was essentially, as a kid, his parents were Hunas, and he had been left behind. So the Hunas are actually enemies, and now Vikramaditya has actually adopted the son of an enemy. Now I've got another layer. So you've got friendship, you've got a relationship between unequals, which is a master and an orphan sort of a friendship, and now we discover that he's also the son of a Huna. So he's the son of an enemy. Now this gives me another layer, which now says that not only is the story about friendship, there can also be conflict in between them because of the ancestry of Kalidasa. But then I turned around and said, ancestry of Kalidasa is still not important because that is in the past. Okay, that's already happened, and Vikramaditya and Kalidasa are friends today. How can I build on that conflict now? So I went back and said, okay, what if now as grown-ups and as adults, Kalidasa actually discovers that Vikramaditya's brother was the guy who was responsible for the death of his father and mother. That Kalidasa figures out that Vikramaditya's brother killed his father and mother in cold blood. So now what happens is I've got conflict. Now not only have I got conflict, I've got friendship. I've got friendship which is now shaky because Kalidasa is a Huna by ancestry. Now I key up that conflict by saying that Kalidasa's parents were killed by Vikramaditya. And now I've got conflict which is at multiple levels. At one level, I've got conflict between Vikramaditya and Kalidasa. I've got conflict between Kalidasa and Vikramaditya's brother. And I've got conflict between Vikramaditya's brother and Vikramaditya. So now what has happened is that I have created a conflict which actually lasts over 2 books. This conflict begins at the end of book 2 and sustains almost to the end of book 4. So that's actually how these kind of ideas kind of grow. So you look at loyalty, you look at love, you look at friendship, and then you see how you can break them, because that's really what storytelling is all about. Because if you just have friendship, it doesn't work. You've got to that friendship has to go through a test of, it has to go through a very dark phase, and then it has to triumph. So that's really what the nature of this storytelling is all about. Again, like for example, if one were to take, okay, let's take. I was talking about Hiranyakashipu, right? I said we'll have Indra and we'll have Hiranyakashipu as the two rival kings of the Asuras and the Devas. So what I did was as I said, I was very clear that I wanted to make Indra as this very powerful, dominating sort of villain. Now, when I looked at Hiranyakashipu, who was the Asura equivalent of Indra, I realized that I would have to make him. He will also have to be large. He will also have to be powerful. He's an Asura, right? So he will have the same qualities as Indra. Only, I mean, he'll be large. He'll be powerful. Yeah. So I realized that both my villains are looking very similar. Okay, Indra and Hiranyakashipu are looking very similar. They behave similarly, and this was problematic because for now, what has happened is that I've got 2 villains who are too similar to one another, and for a reader that becomes boring. It's also difficult for the reader to kind of differentiate between the two. So I really wasn't. Now I'm caught in 2 minds. I really don't know what to do with my story, with my villains, and that's when actually I thought that what if the main villain or the main I won't use the word villain, the main antagonist on the Asura side is actually not Hiranyakashipu but Shukracharya.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we all know that Shukracharya is the Mahaguru of the Asuras. So I said, okay, now what has happened is I've got on one side I've got Indra, who's large, who's powerful, who's all brawn. Okay, he's all physical power. And can you hear me? I think I've lost.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So on one side you've got that. On one side you've got Shukracharya, who's all brain. So he's older. He's not as powerful, but he's all brain, and he drives the plot. He does all the plotting. So this was also something that in the course of telling the story, I grew because I realized that I couldn't have Shukracharya being a physically powerful antagonist. So I had to make him a mentally powerful antagonist. And that's really what happens in the books as well. You see him, he's constantly plotting, he's thinking, he's outsmarting, outthinking everyone. And that's really what his game is about. So I think that's really how structure grows. Yeah, so
Thank you, Shatrujeet, for that elaboration, because we could understand, like, if you want to make the plot interesting, one is, I think you got the angle of vulnerability when it comes to Kalidasa. Even I won't call it pity, but it's kind of you feel for the character, because you kind of went to the layers of the characters, and that you introduced it successively with each of your books, and then bringing in conflicts or the angles, and making them stand to the the tests of friendship and all the difficult phases, and then still be together, because that's how it happens in real life. It's not straightforward, and that's makes the story more appealing. So thank you for that. It really helps us to understand the characters.
Just one more thought on this. In fact, I think this is kind of critical, especially those of my readers who have read the books. I think one of the fundamental ways this book changed, and I can kind of now in retrospect define that moment, was when I conceived this idea called border world, which is where Betal lives, Vikramaditya and Vikram Betal, the Betal where he lives. I think border world was a very key construct in the story. And to be very honest, when I first introduced the idea, when I first started writing it, border world as an entity did not exist. I really didn't know where Betal would be. So I started writing the story and I said, okay, let me figure it out. And then I created border world, which is where Betal kind of lives. And at that time, even when I created it, I did not really know the impact that border world would have. And border world is introduced in book 1. But in book 1, I really did not know how much of an impact border world is going to have on the story. I think it's huge in terms of the way the plot progresses. And it's only probably towards the end of book 3 that I really started seeing the significance of border world. I knew it was going to become an important element in the story. So I think, yes, border world is a very critical thing. It's also true about characters. So again, once again, a very quick thing on characters. So when I first conceived Urvashi, Urvashi is a very critical character in the story. And we all know that she's an Apsara. So I had conceived Urvashi as the classic role of a seductress, because that's what Apsaras do. They're supposed to be seductresses. But in the course of telling the story, I somehow felt that it's wrong to paint Urvashi just as a seductress. I thought that she needed to do a lot more. I wanted to give her a lot more to do, add a lot more dignity to her character, add a lot more depth. So that's again something. Again, I probably will not tell you what happens because there might be readers who haven't read the series, but people who have read the series would immediately know that yes. This is a very, very critical element in, Urvashi is very critical in the story as well. So, yeah, so that's really what it is. It's about subplots. It's about, digging deeper characters. That's it.
I think it's interesting to know how subplots, like you rightly mentioned about the border world. And I think even as not only the plot and the character, what you have at the beginning and how the structure grows, I think even as a writer, you kind of discover a lot of things and the potential of your plots, subplots, and characters. What is your story? So that's really interesting to know. And hearing it from you, we are kind of deciphering it even more, like how the journey of the series altogether came in. It's so holistic, and all the things like kind of come together at the end. So thanks for giving that insight to us. Going to the next question, I'm sure even our readers will have a lot of questions about Vikramaditya Veer Gatha, which we can address in the Q&A. But I think readers are equally curious to know about your next series. So can you please throw some light on what your series is going to be?
Yeah. So as I said, I mean, this is also very broadly in the alternative mythology space. It's a totally original story that no one has heard before, and it's not a simple retelling. It's not a change in perspective. It's a completely new myth. And yeah, I mean, quite a few of my readers have been kind of, they've been asking me about this for the last probably 6 months. And I think over the last 1 month, I've also been kind of, sending out these little teasers. So they've also been quite curious. So Yes, the series is called Warlord of Ayodhya, and I think that's the big question. What is Warlord of Ayodhya, or more importantly, who is Warlord of Ayodhya? I think that's really the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think a lot of my readers have come very close to the target. I think the moment I say Ayodhya, you understand that probably it has got something to do with the Ramayana, because Ram is, from Ayodhya and all of that. So I know there were some readers who thought that this is probably the story of Dashrath. Some people thought this is probably the story of the Ikshvaku clan or whatever it is. Uh, okay, so I think, but nobody really got it right. So let me tell you, this is the story of Ram's brother Bharat. This is the story of the 14-year exile of Ram and what happens in Ayodhya during those 14 years. So that's really what the story is about. We all know. So again, this is, as I said, it's kind of alternative mythology, because the mythology that we know is that Ram was exiled, and Ram, Lakshman, and Sita left Ayodhya, and they went into exile. And for 14 years, they were away from Ayodhya. And then it all ended with, the kidnapping of Sita, Shurpanakha, the kidnapping of Sita, the journey to Lanka, and the defeat of Ravan. What nobody knows about is, in those 14 years, what happened in Ayodhya? What were the kind of challenges that Bharat and Shatrughna had to face? So what actually happens is that when Ram goes away into exile, Bharat goes to Ram and tries to convince him to come back, which we know. And Ram says, no, I will come back only after, because I've given my word to my father. So I will come back only after 14 years. And Bharat says, after 14 years, when you come back, this kingdom will be waiting for you. This city will be waiting for you. Its people will be waiting for you. Its throne will be waiting for you. Now, here's a man who has made a promise to his brother that 14 years later, when he comes back, this kingdom will be standing. What are the kind of trials and tribulations? What are the kind of challenges this man has to face? So this is a completely new myth. Nobody knows what happened in Ayodhya during those 14 years. So if the Ramayana is the story, if the camera follows Ram and Lakshman in the Ramayana, this story is about what happens in Ayodhya. It follows Bharat and Shatrughna. So that's what the story is all about. It's 14 years of Bharat. That's what it is.
Wow, it's really interesting to know, because like me, I think many other readers and everyone, like it's so general, because we travel with Rama. Like you said, the camera is always focused on Rama, but what happens in Ayodhya? So I think with just this storyline, you will be shifting your focus from directly Rama and the journey to Ayodhya and what significant events unfold. But now what comes to my mind next is, when it is something which is really less spoken about, or you will hardly find the references in history. How did you feel, again going back to my previous question of Vikramaditya Veergatha, how much do you have, and how do you plan to build this? Because Bharat is maybe, if I may say, not unsung, because he had equal tribulations and struggles to a kind of, when Rama gave everything to Bharat, it must be he is caught unaware, and how the tribulations of Bharat. So what did you have in hand? Did you have enough references, or like you said, it's going to be a complete only mythology, a new mythology that you'll be building?
There was virtually no reference, because there is no, the story never looks at, looks at what happened in Ayodhya.
Right.
So actually,
right.
So let me tell you how this whole thing started. So when I, as I said, this was probably about 6-7 years ago. I was sitting with a friend of mine, and we were just generally, sitting and talking about the Ramayana and all of that. And suddenly there was a mention of Bharat, and it just struck me that what did Bharat do in those 14 years? What are the kind of challenges he faced, as I just now told you? And I realized there is nothing. I came back, I did some R&D and all of that, and I realized there is absolutely nothing. And it's not just Bharat. So what happens is that the Ramayana actually forgets a lot of characters the moment it goes into the jungle with Ram. So what happens is we forget about Janak. We forget about Bharat's father-in-law Kushadhwaja. We forget about Kaushalya, Kaikeyi, Sumitra. We forget about so many characters that that continue to live in Ayodhya, and these are all characters we have forgotten. We also forget about Bharat's. Bharat did not spend a lot of his life in Ayodhya. He spent a lot of his life in his grandfather's place in Kekeya, which is in Punjab, modern day Punjab.
Okay.
So, you know, his grandfather and his uncle played a huge role in who he was. So I think that's really what it was. I decided that let's do one thing. Let's bring all these characters in, and let's create uh, a new myth, okay, which kind of looks at a 14-year span across these geographies, KK, Ayodhya. It has all the masala that you would find in a Vikramaditya Veergatha story. It's got the Rakshasas, it's got palace intrigue, it's got all of that. It's also got things which are very different from Vikramaditya Veergatha. So, for example, one of the most important things is that there are no superheroes. There are no superheroes. There are no superpowers. So in Vikramaditya, I think that was one of the most important things. Vikramaditya and the nine, you know, the nine counselors, all of them had superpowers. This has no superpowers. Nobody has any superpowers. What we have in this story is magic. There's a lot of magic in this story, and I think magic becomes the crux of what the story is all about. And yeah, so that's really what it is. Urmila is again such a fascinating character. Shatrughna, nobody even thinks about these characters. What did they do for those 14 years? So what I've done is I've taken these characters and I have woven together a new narrative. The first book is yeah, it's going to be out in Jan, and then I've got two more to write. So yeah, it's fun.
It's interesting, and I mean, you have actually given us this teaser, and we really want more. We cannot wait. Like, I can see the comments of finally people are happy to know who the warlord of Ayodhya is, so they'll be looking forward to this. But coming to the next question, and a very obvious one, that why did you pick Bharat as the hero? And what dramatic possibility did you see in Bharat's story that made you take him as a protagonist?
I think what I found interesting about Bharat, as I said, there were a couple of things. One is the fact that you know, ultimately he was the king. I mean, Ram gave him the responsibility of running the kingdom. So Bharat was king. The second was obviously the fact that, as I said, Bharat had not really grown up in Ayodhya. He'd spent a lot of his time in KK. So what happens? And Bharat had no ambitions of becoming king, because he always knew that, you know, Ram was elder to him. He knew that Ram was, you know, was talented and all of that. He never had an ambition of becoming king. And then one fine day, somebody comes to KK and says that, you know, your father is dead. Your elder brother has been exiled for 14 years, and you have to come and become king. And he comes from KK, he comes to Ayodhya, and there is a lot of suspicion in Ayodhya because the people of Ayodhya believe that maybe Bharat also had a hand in Rama's exile. Okay,
Right.
so people are suspicious of Bharat. They don't particularly like him. They want Rama. They want Dashratha. How does a man who is not prepared for the job, how does he run a kingdom for 14 years? And what are the kind of challenges he has to face? Internal, external, whether it's Rakshasas, whether it's rival kings, whether it's there are lots of things. I'm not in a position to right now. I don't want to send out any spoilers, but there are lots of things that can go wrong and do go wrong, which is what great storytelling is all about. I mean, things have to go wrong. I mean, if they're right, then there's no story.
There's no story, right?
So I think that was really what it was, the dramatic the possibility in Bharat as someone who never saw himself worthy of being king. How does he accept the responsibility of becoming king, and how does he handle that responsibility? That's really what it was. So in many ways, actually, in Vikramaditya Veergatha, Vikramaditya Veergatha is a more plot-driven story. The characters also have their own arcs and all of that, but it's essentially a plot-driven story. I think in the Warlord of Ayodhya, plot is huge. Obviously, plot will play a big role. But one of the things that we will see is Bharat's growth as a character, because when we first meet Bharat, he's a 22-year-old man, and he's asked to become king. And then we are next, 22, 23, and then we'll see him till the age of about 30, 36, 37. So we will actually see the growth of that man. And that's really what I thought was fascinating. That's why I picked Bharat.
That's the potential of Bharat, and I think it'll be interesting read because we never aligned our thoughts to characters, because those were the highlights, like you said. After 14 years, the highlight was completely on Rama. So I think this will be something interesting to read, and we have questions coming in. But before I had one final question. Of course, you have said like what the story is going to be. If you could throw some more light about like the highlights that you said, superpowers were the highlight, and they created the plot, and they drove the plot in Vikramaditya Veergatha. What would be there here? What will be your USP? And second, like, your readers have already come to expect epic confrontations because you had larger than life villains and with their superpowers between your heroes and your villains. So in Vikramaditya, you had the human king who was up against the Devas and the Asuras. Will Bharat also have these kind of confrontations, and what his defenders would be in Ayodhya? And would he face similar challenges?
Yes. So let me answer your first question. As I said, magic is, as an idea, is intrinsic to this series. And when I mean magic, it means that, as I said, there are no superpowers, which means that anyone who is able to tap into magic can use magic to their advantage. That's the strength of this universe which I've created. And what happens is that it's magic that sustains Ayodhya. It's magic that keeps Ayodhya safe and protected. And the Rakshasas have figured out that the only way they can get to Ayodhya is by destroying magic. And this is essentially the conflict about what the Rakshasas try and do to destroy magic, and how and whether the defenders of Ayodhya, which is essentially Bharat, Shatrughna, and those who are left behind, whether they are able to prevent the Rakshasas from doing the damage that they want, and whether they're able to protect the magic that keeps Ayodhya safe. So that's really what the construct is about. It's all about magic. It's all about the people who make magic happen. That's really what it is. So yes, you already know that there are Rakshasas, so there are bound to be epic confrontations. But again, I think what I've done in this series is that I've tried not to repeat the same kind of structural format which I followed in Vikramaditya. So in that sense, there is probably the confrontations need not necessarily be always physical confrontations. They could be confrontations in terms of conspiracies. They could be confrontations that Bharat is not even aware of. So it's essentially a space where I have loaded things very, very strongly against Bharat. Things are going to become very bad before they become good. But yeah, I think readers are going to enjoy it because again, there are a host of characters and there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun writing Bharat's character, writing KK's character. I think these are two characters I've completely enjoyed. There are a couple of other secondary characters who are a lot of fun. We've got, yeah, I think it should be fun.
Yeah, really. I mean, after listening to this, I personally have a lot of questions with how the journey of Bharat is going to be and how the ending is going to be, because we just know about one ending. But before, I would like to open the floor to audience questions, because they've been intrigued with this idea and your revelation. So let's hear it from. First, can we start with there's someone? It's the mobile name 1+60. Hello, sir. You say it's a new myth. Do we see some connection to the story, to the previous 3 books, maybe with Indra? No, I think it's a completely new series, as he rightly said. So it has no connection with moving to the next question. I would request you all to please unmute and ask yourself. Shamal Rao, if you could unmute and please speak to Shatrujeet directly. Is Shamal Rao there?
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Good. It's nice to see you after a long time, sir.
Yeah, nice to see you and hear you as well, Shamal Rao, sir.
How are you? So much. I'm fine. Thank you very much, sir. First and foremost, I wish you the best for this new venture, sir, new books.
Thank you. New books, actually, because there are 3 of them.
Yes. That is why I made it plural, not books. I wish you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I was very much impressed actually when you refer to this alternate history in your opening remarks.
Uh-huh.
Alternate history. As I understand, this is a genre of fiction that
Uh-huh.
looks at what if scenarios from history's important turning points,
Uh-huh.
and as you say, actually spin or bring out entirely different version based
Uh-huh.
on more on conjecture than
Uh-huh.
on factual or logical evidence.
Uh-huh.
Uh, then, if that be the case, is this alternate mythology, which is going to be a new genre under Hindu mythology?
Uh, I think
Question
that's a
one.
good
Question
I
one,
think
sir.
that's a good question, because I honestly don't know whether it will evolve into a new genre. But the hope definitely is, because because the truth is that we've just been telling the same stories over and over again.
Sir,
So it would be good to have new stories with new perspectives.
sir.
So I think if we did have alternate mythology come in as a genre, that would be good. It would make a lot more fun. It would be a lot more fun for a lot of readers, I'm sure.
Thank you. One more point I was having doubt was, is this alternate mythology present in other, let us put Greek mythology, do we have there?
To
Or
be
is it
very
only
honest,
limited to us, this freedom, liberty, or whatever that is?
I honestly don't know, but I think alternative mythology, if one were to take, you have this new kids series called Percy Jackson.
Uh,
Percy Jackson series, which is by Rick Riordan. That is
I
in a
wrote
way
it.
alternative mythology, because it's about Percy Jackson is essentially Perseus born in modern day America.
Okay.
So that's in a way alternative mythology. It takes Perseus, which is a Greek character, and he's born in today's modern day America as a young boy, and that's why he's called Percy Jackson. So
Yes.
I think the idea of alternative mythology is it's I think again something that we've kind of taken, and it's I think an opportunity for us to embrace, because it's a great place to be, to look at new ways of telling old stories, uh, new ways of telling familiar stories, and even finding new stories. I mean, just with familiar characters and settings. So I think alternative mythology is something that I don't know how prevalent it is in any part of the world. I'm hoping that it does become more popular all over the world.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Thank
thanks,
you very much. I wish to know more about that other mythology you spoke of. You may put it in that message box at the writer's name.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, can we have Suja Pisharodi? Suja, are you there? Please unmute and you can ask the question directly.
I don't think she's there.
Okay, I will read out the question. First, she says, lovely listening to the way you create characters and structures in the story. Have you hesitated to write about a character from mythology because you are not sure how the audience would take it? That's the first question. Or even worse, you could be censored for even taking liberties with such a character. And thanks for unveiling to the about a lot of IELTS. These two questions.
Yes, I think when I first thought about Indra as a character, this is going back to Vikramaditya Veergatha. When I decided that the Devas and the Asuras would be my villains, I was obviously conscious of the fact that Indra is at the end of the day the king of the Devas, which means he represents the Devas who are supposed to be good. In accepted mythology, the Devas are supposed to be good, but in my story they are bad, and Indra is bad. So when I say bad, I mean I use the word bad in a very broad sense, because the whole thing is it's all about people with agendas, whether it's the Asuras or the Devas, and nobody's really bad. Everyone is either bad or good. But I was aware that I was painting Indra in a light which was not complimentary. So I was aware of this, and I honestly didn't know how people would react to it. But then what happened was that I realized that what Indra was doing in the story was that he was coming to take the halahal from Vikramaditya. And who had given Vikramaditya the halahal? Shiva. So Shiva has come and given Vikramaditya the halahal, and Indra wants to take it from Vikramaditya. So in a way, what Indra is doing is that he's not challenging Vikramaditya, he's actually challenging Shiva. Now, if one were to look at the hierarchy of our gods, I think Shiva is very clearly ahead of Indra. So in that sense, I was safe. I knew that my hero was defending something that on behalf of a greater god. So I was in that sense, I knew I was safe. And Indra anyway had a reputation of being has a reputation of being cowardly and all of that. So I think I was safe there. But yes, I think this is true. There are times when you've got to look back and see whether what you have written, how it's going to be taken, whether it's going to be accepted, whether it's going to rub people the wrong way. It's part of the same question that you asked. Can I change the ending and can I make the Kauravas win? And will it be acceptable? I think, as I said, that's the whole point. We know the environment that we are living in. We must be aware of that, and we must do it only if we know very clearly why we are doing it. So, apart from that, I've never had that problem with the new Warlord of Ayodhya series. Well, my hero is Bharat, and Ram is anyway in exile. So I don't think there's any problem. No.
Thanks, Shatru. I think that answers the question for Suja. Aditya, will you like to go next, please?
Yes. Hi, Shatrujeet.
Yeah, hi Aditya.
Yeah, seeing you after a very long time, and it's very good to hear about your next series.
Thank you.
I think I remember meeting you in PILF some years back, and you mentioning to us, this is such a common scenario. What happened 14 years in Ayodhya, and no one even have thought about it till date. Okay, obviously you would not tell all these details, but I think the genesis of that story was somewhere in the back of your mind at that time only, which
It's possible. How long ago was this? This was.
It was. If I'm not wrong, it was in 2017 PILF where I'm.
It's possible because, as I told you, this idea came to me about 6 years ago. So it's possible that I'd already started thinking about this idea, and I was. So it was obviously I was thinking about it, and yeah. So right. So what's your question?
Yeah. So my question is that now being an alternative mythology, will it in some ways change what happened in the Ramayana later on, or will it weave seamlessly into already known ending of the Ramayana? And second question.
You're talking about Warlord of Ayodhya?
Yes, Warlord of Ayodhya. Yes.
Okay. And your second question?
And second question is like, now we know who is the protagonist of your series.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's Bharat and Shatrughan. But who is the main antagonist? Because, just like or do you want to keep it under wraps right now and just reveal it to us later on?
Yes. I think what happens is that, okay, let me answer the first question first. When I look at alternative mythology, and I think that's one critical question, whether the story is going to end with the return of Ram or not. I think in my story it's fairly clear that that's actually what is going to happen, because Bharat is going to be king, because the idea is I want to tell Bharat's story of that 14-year period. So that's really the story that I'm interested in. So yes, it would come back to the Ramayana of old. So to answer your question, Rama would come back.
Okay.
That's so the ending in that sense is obvious. It's like, if one were to look at and retell, the story of India's independence, yes, India would get independence. But I think the interesting thing in the Warlord of Ayodhya would be, how does Bharat sustain for 14 years?
Yes.
How does he kind of almost lose everything, and how does he salvage the situation? I think that's really what the story is. And what happens when Ram walks back and sees Ayodhya? What does he see?
Yeah.
I think that's really the story, and that's really the fun bit of it. So in that sense, it's alternative. So in this case, as I said, it's alternative mythology, mainly because it's not a what if scenario. It's more a what who scenario.
Yeah.
Or it's more about the character, and less about this. To answer your second question about the antagonist, I would like to keep it under wraps.
Okay.
So for some very obvious reasons, because I think the antagonists. What I did with Vikramaditya was that right from the very beginning, you knew who the antagonists were.
Yeah.
You knew Indra, you knew Shukracharya, you knew Hiranyakashipu. I think in this case, it would be more interesting to kind of, see it open, stage by stage, and you're trying to figure out, okay, who's really playing the game. So I'll keep it under wraps, but my guess is probably by the end of book 2 you would know.
Okay, end of book 2. Okay.
That's my sense. But of course, I'm talking about it without even having started writing book 2. So it might be, only towards book 3. But my guess is probably by end of book 2.
Okay. Thanks a lot. And we
Okay, cool.
also look forward to the horror story which you had to shelve because of the pandemic.
Yes, that will probably happen about 4 years from now.
Okay,
Let's see.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Interesting. Thanks, Aditya. And thanks for reminding us of the horror stories. We have something more to look forward to. But next, I think some interesting questions from Brinda. Brinda, if you can unmute that. Brinda, are you there? Okay. I can see Brinda, but I don't know if. Okay, I'll read out the question. While writing alternate mythology, do you feel constrained by the boundaries of the existing stories? Is it more liberating to write a completely new fantasy where the world building is entirely your own? And how would you compare these two approaches?
Okay, whose question was this?
Brinda. I just have her first name. Yeah.
Okay, Vrinda. I think Vrinda Baliga. Probably Vrinda Baliga. Okay. Hi, Vrinda. Okay. So do I feel constrained? No. Can you repeat the first part of the question, please?
Do you feel constrained by the boundaries of the existing stories? Is it more liberating to write a completely new fantasy where the world building is entirely your own?
Okay, I think I enjoy the fact that I take some things that already exist rather than tell a completely new story where where the reader is totally unfamiliar with the world, the universe, all of that. I think derive joy out of telling a story where the reader is familiar with some things, like in Vikramaditya or with the Warlord of Ayodhya, which is Bharat's story, taking some known elements and then creating an all-new fantasy or all-new universe around it. I think that's the most fun you can have, because you take some things which already exist and either use them as is or kind of just twist them a little here and there so that twist them so that you can have more fun. So as I said, Vikramaditya and Kalidasa being contemporaries is something that existed in myth and legend. You just kind of take that and then make them friends, and then make them friends who turn into enemies. I know that's the fun thing. Or again, Vikramaditya and Betal, Vikram and Betal, telling their stories and how did Vikram and Betal become friends. And so I think there's a lot of joy in telling those kind of stories, because it's also a process of discovery for me as well as for the reader, because the reader has known about Vikram and Betal, but how did these two become friends? Okay, so there's a backstory to it and all of that. So I enjoy doing that. Not to say that I would never do a complete greenfield fantasy. Maybe there would be a time when I'll do it. But as of now, I really enjoy these kind of, borrowing from Hindu mythology and tinkering with it and kind of, telling an all new story is what I enjoy most. Gives me fun, and I think my readers also enjoy it. So, yeah.
Thanks. I think, Vrinda, that answers your question. Uttara Desai, if you're here, you may go next. I'll just read it out. Any specific element that makes the Warlord of Ayodhya an alternative mythology?
I'm sorry, is there any
specific element that makes Warlord of Ayodhya an alternative mythology? I think she's looking at a specific element that makes you think it's an alternative mythology.
No, I think it's just the fact that it looks at a completely new facet of a familiar story. So in that sense, actually, the Warlord of Ayodhya is what you might classically call a spin-off. It takes a secondary character from a different story and creates an all-new story about that character and his or her journey. So in a very pure sense, it's actually a spin-off. It's alternative mythology because it's ultimately mythology and tells you an alternative story from a known mythology. It's not pure play alternative mythology the way Vikramaditya Veergatha was, where it did a what-if scenario. It's not a what-if scenario, but yeah, it's, as I said, it's more who if or a what who scenario, whatever you
Right.
might call it.
So, taking a hint from Brinda's question, I think you had a very free hand in this because there weren't many references, and people will just be, it will be a blank slate for them. What happened to Bharat?
I think
40
so.
years.
I think so
I think you
too.
had
Absolutely.
more scope of building. Okay. Abhin, if Abhin's question is, can we expect more, someone more powerful than Ravana? I don't know if you would like to answer that.
Yeah, I would. I am working towards a very, very fascinating ending, because obviously, you've got, if you set up something which is called Warlord of Ayodhya, you would want a big, massive ending with our hero doing some really cool stuff. So I am working towards a very big ending, and I have a couple of ideas which I am quite excited with. Aditya already asked me who my antagonist was, and I told him I'm not going to reveal it right now. But yes, definitely, I am looking at a very, very big antagonist. Who it is, how the antagonist works, how the antagonist is going to be put down. I don't want to talk about it right now. I like that suspense to build over the series of the first two books. But yes, to answer your question, I hope I am able to give you a villain who's really, really big and really, really cool. So when Bharat takes him down, you're very happy. Sorry, Priyanka, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I wasn't.
Sorry.
Abhin has another interesting question. I would really like to take this up. How about trying an alternative mythology that connects two mythologies, like connecting Ramayana and Mahabharata as a single story, or I think building a bridge between the two?
It's an interesting idea. It's something that, to be very honest, I have thought about, but also, to be very honest, I have not thought enough about in terms of how to do, what to do. You must also realize that doing that is going to be I don't know how many books. It'll be probably 10 books, 15 books. I have no idea, because they are two completely independent mythologies. And I think the only common thread, there are very few common threads between the two. So it's going to be challenging, very challenging. I also realize that it's not something that cannot be done. But if one has to be responsible to both myths in that sense, or both narratives. So one has to do it well. Difficult to do. But yeah, I think it's going to be challenging. But let's see. I don't know. I don't have the bandwidth for it right now. But yeah, who knows? Someday somebody might. Let's see. But a good idea.
It was a brilliant idea. I mean, it's even very challenging and very you need a lot of courage to do that. So
Yeah,
let's
absolutely.
see. Let's see if it happens.
Also,
yeah.
what happens is that you must realize that the ideas that are embedded in these two narratives are very different ideas. One is about dharma, one is about karma. One is essentially the story of a human being going and defeating a Rakshasa king. The other is of two human families fighting against one another. So the ideas are actually very different. So I don't know how you can kind of create an integration. It might be, I really don't know. It's going to be very difficult to do it. But if someone pulls it off and does it well, then you've got a big bestseller on your hands, I guess.
Nishant Gupta, would you like to please ask your question?
Yes, hi Shatru, how are you?
Hi Nishant, how are you? Good to see you here.
Thank you so much, Damien. So I'll just keep it quick. I just have a small question. How much do you think that we should, add the element of fiction to a mythology? As in, should your book be like 50% fiction, 50% taken from mythology, or do you have something like that in mind when you're, thinking of a story?
So is that it? That's it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Nishant. Yeah, I think that's an important question, a good question. The way to look at it is probably, again, what are you trying to do? So with Vikramaditya Virgatha, I'd imagine mythology is probably 10% of it. 90% is fiction, because the story is a what if, as I said. So I essentially took just the halahal, and I took some known characters and I put them in a new mix, and it's an all new story. So as I said, maybe it's 15%, not more than 10 to 15% is mythology. The rest is all my creation. It's more or less going to be the same with Warlord of Ayodhya, probably even more, because what happens is that in Warlord of Ayodhya, there is no mythology per se. It's just characters that we have heard about or read about or seen. The idea is to now kind of present them in a way which is more contemporary. Try and look at their internal conflicts and their external conflicts and their own interpersonal relationships through a modern lens. I think that's really the objective. And so again, it's probably going to be largely fiction because there is hardly any mythology on Bharat and Keikei and Shatrughna during those 14 years. So virtually everything I have to create from scratch. To answer your question specific, I've also taken obviously some liberties in terms of timelines with Bharat and Shatrughna. I have taken some liberties, but now if one were to set out and say I'm going to rewrite let's suppose I'm just going to say I'll write the 18-day war of the Mahabharata. How much of it would be fiction? How much of it would be true to mythology? I'd imagine probably at least about all the fundamental blocks would have to be true to what happened in mythology. So whether it's the fall of Bhishma, Shikhandi, the Chakravyuha, Abhimanyu, Ghatotkach, Jayadratha, all those things would always be part and parcel drawn from mythology. How it is done would probably be fictitious. So it might be done in a sci-fi manner. You might decide to play it sci-fi. You might decide to say, I'm going to do this in, the entire battle will not happen in Kurukshetra in one place. Probably the geography will be spread across, 7 cities. That's all okay. I think those are the kind of liberties you can take. And I think you should take also, because I kind of, struggle with the fact that, the entire battle, an epic battle of that scale happened in one place, which is Kurukshetra. It doesn't just sound right. How do you fit so many people into one battlefield? So my sense is that battle probably happened over a much larger space, in terms of physical space. So if I were to retell that 18-day war, that war would probably happen over a much larger geography. It would be more, probably the weaponry would be sci-fi. I don't know what I would use. I'm just thinking aloud. But I think that's really what I would do. So it would be probably the fiction would be the fiction that I can tamper with. And what I can't tamper with would be those building blocks of what happened on which day, when did Abhimanyu die, all those kind of things.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, Chatru. Thank you so much. Looking forward to have you in Bangalore.
Oh, cool. Yeah, next time. See you.
So, in interest of time, we have just one last question. And before that, Shekhar was asking if you could recommend any alternative mythologies or history books for a good read.
Any what?
Alternative mythologies, any other good one recommend for reading and history books?
Honestly, I don't know. In mythology, I have absolutely no clue. Like alternative history, there is this particular series called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. I know I always keep going back to that because it's one of the most well-known alternative history stories. But that's basically a story that looks at how Abraham Lincoln, when he was young, he used to actually hunt vampires, and it's about how the South, which is the southern states of the United States, those who were in favor of slavery, they used to actually they were vampires. So it's a completely different take on Abraham Lincoln and the entire Civil War of the United States. I haven't read any of the books in that series, but there's a movie and I've seen bits and pieces of it. The movie is not nice. I didn't like it, but I've heard the series is good. So
okay.
Alternative mythology, no, I have absolutely no idea. No, apart from probably Percy Jackson, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chatru. Can we have a last question from Ashwin? Because our next guests are in queue. Ashwin, if you may ask the question.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Ashwin. Hi.
So I wanted to ask you in terms of themes, like I am currently on your 3rd book of the Vikramaditya series. And like the themes, although it's like something like very simple, like friendship, the way, like, there are multiple characters and the interaction between them, all of them show friendship in slightly different ways? Or like, so do you plan from the start, or do you just like build as it goes?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that's a very important question because the idea is for you not to become repetitive. I think because if, as you rightly said, if every friendship looks like every other friendship, if every battle looks like every other battle, then there's no joy for the reader, right? Mm, so yes, I think I was very clear in the way I had planned the friendship between, say, as I said, Kalidasa and Vikramaditya. So that was something that I really worked on in terms of how I would layer the friendship, how that friendship would come under strain, how that friendship would break, and what would happen then subsequently. But there are other friendships, like for example, the friendship between say Amarasimha and Ghatakarpara. I don't know if you've reached that stage, but I think that's a very interesting friendship because Amarasimha is probably in his mid-50s and Ghatakarpara is probably in his early 20s. I don't think you would probably see that as much in book 3. You would probably see that you see that in book 2 actually. You see the beginnings of that in book 2, and you will see that happen in book 4 actually. So I think that's a friendship. Again, it's friendship between two people who are, they've got a huge age difference between them. Probably at least 30 years of difference, age difference. So that's an interesting friendship. Uh, so I think that's something that I kind of developed. Now Ghatakarpara and his friendship with, say, his childhood friend Atulya Teja, that's a different sort of friendship because they are childhood friends. So I think that's something that as I write, I kind of develop. I hadn't thought through all of this. It's just something that I realized that, okay, the friendship can't look very similar to the friendship between Vikramaditya and Kalidasa. So how do I kind of modify it and make it still work interestingly? So that's how I did that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Has been always like always a very thrilling and a very entertaining session, very interesting. We got to know a lot of perspectives and things we kind of miss out or oversee, and it helped us dive deeper into the character, the narratives, the plotting, and it was really interesting even for a novice or an amateur writer. I think you gave a lot of insights for them to it really inspires budding writers, and it kind of matures, it gives us maturity in what kind of writing we should pursue. So thank you, Shatrujeet, and we are looking forward to, of course, the Warlord of Ayodhya. Thank you so much, and I hope you keep us posted and you keep us updated with what's going to happen with the series.
Yeah, I definitely.
I think January is when you said.
Yeah, the book is scheduled for January. Okay. As I said, anyone who's got questions can now reach out to me. I'll try and answer as much as I can without giving out spoilers. So yeah, and once again, thank you the entire team at Adventures of Literati. This was, I think, a good, fun event that we had. I hope you have a lot more fun in the sessions that are to follow. And yeah, all the best for everything.